Well, hey, okay, we're live.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Nick Volato and Chris Flum here from Big Blue View to go over the much anticipated New York Jets, New York Giants Snoopy Bowl, where we were very eager to watch Aaron Rodgers and the first team New York Jets go up against the backups of the New York Giants, some of which will more than likely not be a part of the New York Giants by probably tomorrow. We'll find out, but there's still some things to discuss, some things of importance. There were a lot of players that were injured. We got a glimpse on certain players who were healthy, who did not dress, and that might suggest to all of us that their roster spot is not only safe, but they are in the plans for the New York Giants. And we also got to witness Isaiah Simmons. And on his first third down as a New York Giant, he pressured and even got a hand on Aaron Rodgers, forcing an incomplete pass. But Chris, how you doing?
Yeah, I am doing pretty well. It's third preseason game. So, it's not well enough for what it is.
Well enough for what it is. And I think we could probably start with those injuries. And luckily, the Giants didn't really play anybody of great magnitude or importance, but there were still several injuries in this game. Bryce Ford-Wheaton, this one sucked too, Chris, because I was excited to see what he had to offer. This was the kind of game where Bryce Ford-Wheaton was going to really receive a lot of attention from the New York Giants and targets. He left in the first quarter with a knee injury. Zion Gilbert ended up leaving with, I believe it was a hamstring injury. Bobby McCain with a concussion. Chris Myrick with a hand. Wyatt Davis had to get carted off with an ankle injury. I believe Jamon Green ended up leaving with a shoulder injury. So it was just a lot of those young players. Javarius Owens as well. I think that was with a hamstring injury. Don't quote me on it. But what do you make of all of these injuries, and what impact do you believe it's going to have? And then there's not a lot of information right now because we don't know how long-term a lot of these are. The only one that really looked very serious was Wyatt Davis's.
Yeah, I think it being the third preseason game with final cuts looming, really it complicates things. And I'm kind of writing about this, or was writing about this. We'll be writing about it again after our live stream concludes. But since we don't know how long term any of these injuries are, except for Wyatt Davis, again, that one looked nasty. He was carted off the field with an air cast already on his lower leg. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he landed on the injured reserve, and that was just one player who isn't cut but isn't going to be on the team this year. Yeah, this complicates things. Bryce Ford-Wheaton, he got a shout out from Joe Shane for his special teams play. He's got the size and athleticism the Giants don't really have elsewhere at their wide receiving core. So, there was a niche available for him to fill. And if that knee injury kind of it complicates things, it kept him from really being able to show out on the field. Same with Chris Myrick. Tommy Sweeney had that medical incident, that medical event earlier. What was it? Late last week, earlier this week, something like that. The days kind of run together anymore. But we haven't really gotten an update on Sweeney and what his condition is going forward. So if Chris Myrick's hand injury is something significant, that's both of the Giants blocking tight ends. They don't have a backup for Daniel Bellinger. If they were looking at carrying 4 tight ends, Bobby McCain, he was a guy we were looking at as a possible starter in this secondary way back in the offseason. So then you've got a guy he's got a cornerback pedigree, experience starting games as a safety, and if he's in the concussion protocol, well, do you keep him? And then if he wasn't going to be in your plans, do you just waive him while he's got a concussion? That's cold-blooded, but that might just be what happens. So it really complicates things. And the Giants had thus far been pretty much unscathed through preseason and camp. There had been Tyre Phillips had an injury. Colin Johnson has an injury, but none of what they've had been particularly long term. But now all of a sudden they get this rash of injuries, and worst possible timing.
it definitely clouds and muddies the water of prognosticating who's going to make the roster just because we don't know the severity of so many of these injuries. In terms of tight ends, I was kind of under the mindset that the Giants were only going to carry 3 tight ends. I think it gets interesting when you start talking about the running back position because the Giants only going to carry 6 between the 2 position groups. We know the Giants and Mike Kafka like to get really creative with what they do from an offensive standpoint, how they really put how they put their talent out on the football field in terms of 11, 12, 21, 22 personnel. I think their wide receivers are diverse, though. And we saw one of them, Jalen Hyatt, played a few snaps. And on the first play of the game, Chris, I love what the New York Giants did. Mike Kafka took Jalen Hyatt. They motioned him to the field side, isolated him against one of the best cornerbacks in the league, Ahmad Sauce Gardner. And they ran a stutter at the sticks 10 yards down the field. And you can see Sauce Gardner just kind of flatten his path out to close down on the stutter. And Jalen Hyatt, one of the things that is most impressive about him, one of the traits I love, is his acceleration from that stagnant position. Once he stutters and he acts as if he is decelerating his hips, you just see him shot out of a cannon right up the sidelines. And he had about 3 steps on Sauce Gardner in a better situation with a better throw that could have been maximized. And that would have just blew up Twitter if Hyatt burned Sauce Gardner.
Oh, of course. And that was great to see. And again, on the other side of the ball, it was great to see Isaiah Simmons out there and getting that pressure on third down. That's something I honestly wasn't really expecting to see Simmons on the field in this game. I figured the Giants would take their time, really get him up to speed in the defense, in the defensive language with the scheme and just how they call their plays, and then kind of unleash him on the Cowboys. But getting him out there early on, I think that kind of speaks well to how Wink Martindale is able to communicate with his players and just find ways to use guys. Get this kid on the field in a low stakes game, find out what he does well, and then just let him do that. Like, Isaiah Simmons is an incredible athlete. He's got great speed. He's got great length. So, you know what? Let him blitz.
Bob Hoppa brought up on the broadcast how Wink Martindale asked Isaiah Simmons, what do you like to do? And he's like, I like to rush the passer. It's like, all right, well, we'll find a role in you doing that. And that's the exact role we thought he would fulfill. Passing situations, third down. That was a simulated pressure. Only 4 guys ended up coming. There was 7 on the line of scrimmage, and both O'Shane Ximines and Isaiah Simmons were 2 of those players to come on that simulated pressure. It's not a blitz, it's just a simulated pressure. And what did that do? Since O'Shane was outside of the tackle had to focus on O'Shane Ximines, and that isolated Isaiah Simmons against the running back Michael Carter. This is wasting blockers, and it's what Wink Martindale does, because if you look at both the guards on that play, they have no one to block. They're both just looking around. That's all due to alignment. And Wink Martindale is one of the best defensive coordinators at scheming that type of pressure. And I think Isaiah Simmons is really going to benefit from having Wink Martindale as his coordinator.
He will. That Wink is one of the DCs who can really use what Isaiah Simmons brings to the table. Like, we'd had our live stream, which eventually became a podcast, right after the Giants traded for Isaiah Simmons. And we said Simmons was going to be one hell of a toy for Wink Martindale. And we're already seeing it. That is really very exciting. This game really didn't go, I think, the way the Giants wanted it to. I'm not sure how many people were expecting the Giants to win with the Jets starting offense on the field. But the game, it just kind of got out of hand as things went along. There were positives. I think we probably should talk about Tommy DeVito. I stand by what I said after the Lions game. Tommy DeVito is fun. And I think that's a positive takeaway from this game, as well as how Isaiah Simmons was used. How Eric Gray, he looks pretty good out there. Maybe not explosive, but just competent as a runner, as a returner, as a guy who he could give the Giants good reason to only have to carry 3 running backs.
He could. I just wish he was a little bit better in pass protection. And I didn't see any glaring issues in today's game, but I haven't watched it from the all-22 angle. But I've watched those other 2 all-22 tapes several times. Eric Gray had about 5 or 6 debilitating mistakes that could get Daniel Jones really hurt. He's not going to find the football field if he's making those mistakes. come the regular season. So that's my one thing with Eric Gray, but he's going to make this team. I think Deshaun Corbin looks fine as well, but I don't know if there's going to be a roster spot for a player like that. I think Breida's safe. Barkley's obviously safe. So that leaves possibly only one other spot. Could be two, though. And if it is two, I don't know if the Giants are going to give it to Gary Brightwell, who hasn't been there all training camp. It sucks, but that's just the reality of the situation.
That absolutely is the reality. And we talked before about how many running backs and tight ends combined the Giants carry. Right now, they've got, if they only have 3 healthy tight ends, 2 of them are Darren Waller and Lawrence Cager. And those guys are really more receiver than tight end. Literally, they played college ball as receivers. So, yeah, that I think that also adds to the math and complicates the math, because then do you have 6 receivers, 2 receiving tight ends, or maybe hybrid tight ends who are mostly receivers and occasionally perimeter blockers, and then 1 blocking tight end and 3 running back. Like, it's getting this numbers game down is going to be very interesting over the next couple days. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the Giants only carry like 5 receivers, but also look at Cager and Waller as potentially big slots, or maybe even motion them out wide to the X or flanker positions.
It's interesting how they're going to do it. And Juicy Whitman says cut down day is going to be brutal, though. He said it in our comments, and he's absolutely right. There's going to be some good football players that we appreciate, and there's going to be some players, and if Bryce Ford Wheaton wasn't hurt, I think he would fall into this category, and he still may, that the Giants are going to try to pass through waivers, and we're going to cross our fingers and be like, I hope someone doesn't claim them. That's not even bringing up the fact that the Giants are going to claim some players shortly, because other teams are going to be like, hey, look, you don't fit our system. We're going to try to sneak you through waivers and be sneaky, like the Jets did with Lawrence Cager at a certain point last year, and also with Jason Pinnock at around this time last year, final cuts. They tried to sneak him through, and to the benefit of the New York Giants, he looks like he's probably going to be the starting safety next to Xavier McKinney. But you brought up Tommy DeVito and David Sills. I want to talk about both of these players, man. Tommy DeVito, he's probably the best third-string quarterback I've seen on the New York Giants for quite a while. He's very interesting. Now, he's not going to make the team with Tyrod Dale. Tyrod is a proven veteran, and he might not have all the capabilities of Daniel Jones, but he can run an offense and be very functional, whereas DeVito is just a fun preseason guy, but one that I hope the Giants stash on the practice squad. He stays there, and hopefully we never see him out there, because that means something happens to Daniel Jones, but still a guy who's very easy to root for, local kid, very tough, and you could see that in his play. And I'm not going to lie, some of the throws he makes, Chris, it kind of fires off of his hand. He has a much better arm than I thought when he was coming out of Illinois.
Yeah, one of the things, and I noticed this during the game, one of the things he really excels at is generating power from the ground up. You can see him plant his feet, press into the ground, and then see it kind of the energy travel up his kinetic chain, through his legs, through his hips, up through the trunk, and then out through his arm. Because the ball he doesn't have a ton of velocity at the start of his motion, but by the time the ball gets to the end, it's whipping out of there. And that really does help him when he's able to set his feet when he's throwing on the move. Yeah, he's able to generate some pretty impressive velocity. You know, it's not crazy young Matt Stafford or Patrick Mahomes Superman throw type arm talent, but with his mobility, with his athleticism, he's got some tools. He's got some traits worth investing in. And yeah, he's a third string quarterback. I don't want to see him on the field. You don't want to see him on the field. But maybe next year, he could allow the Giants to move on from Tyrod Taylor. Like, I don't feel terrible about him being their emergency third string quarterback.
Especially if he continues to develop. And then we have David Sills, who was on the active roster last year, who caught 6 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown in this 32-24 defeat by the hands of the New York Jets. David Sills, there were some of those passes that were inaccurate from Tommy DeVito, and he bailed Tommy DeVito out. And then you had the interception pick 6, where you could blame David Sills. I think it was a little bit of a miscommunication. It was supposed to be a quick RPO, and then one of the Jets defenders got in the way, and Sills didn't do a good job adjusting his route off of that and kind of going inward. Tommy DeVito thought he was going to continue inside. Sills just sat, and that's some of the issues with, I guess, choice routes, if you will, but it does seem like it was a miscommunication there. It's not like, in my opinion, because I saw this floating around Twitter, David Sills is taking plays off. Like that does David Sills doesn't take plays off. At least it doesn't seem like that to me. And I feel like he's bore that out his entire career, dating back to his time at West Virginia.
Yeah, we cannot accuse him of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that play was kind of screwed up from the start. Matt Parrott, who we could probably talk about a little bit, he gave up some pressure. I think that kind of screwed up the timing, and then I think Sills was expecting the ball to be where he was, and he sat where he was supposed to sit. But with the timing being screwed up, DeVito had to adjust the throw. He could not put it where he wanted to because there were defenders in the way. And then
Yep.
DeVito just wasn't able to just make the adjustment, I'm sorry, Sills wasn't able to make the adjustment and get started again because that's just not him. He's not a quick, shifty, stop-start type receiver. He's big, he's tall, he's long. Yeah, this is kind of the book on David Sills, though. He is a guy who consistently flashes in camp. He flashes in preseason. He is better than most any other team's second or third string defensive backs. But once you get him against starters, once you get him in games where defenses are scheming, he just kind of falls flat. And so, like, he is the hall of almost. Like, he is right on that line of, do you keep this guy if you get him on the game? Is he going to contribute? Is he going to be a player for you? Or is he going to be taking up a roster spot from someone at another position who who can give you something? And I don't know. David Sills he's just an enigma at wide receiver because he's a tease.
He's not very explosive or athletic, but if you watch him run routes, like the one route where he came back
Yes.
through 3 defenders and caught the football, coaches are going to love those little details up the route stem to get those defenders to move in a certain way to where he can break back and there's going to be an opening. Now, adjacent routes also assist that, but that's what coaches really like about David Sills. That and the block that he threw on the Deshaun Corbin touchdown. I get it. It was 1 yard. It's not the biggest deal, but go back to last year's tape. We kind of mock and criticize, not criticize, but we make fun of David Sills like, oh, he was out there. Like, he's terrible. And he's not explosive or athletic. You don't want him to be a wide receiver operating in your 11 personnel package, but he had a lot of key blocks that sprung huge Saquon Barkley runs. One of them is a weak side block against the Green Bay Packers where he took, I think, Devondre Campbell. He chipped Devondre Campbell to another offensive lineman, I think, who was pulling. And then he went and he picked up the cornerback at the perfect time Saquon Barkley was hitting the hole. And it sprung a really long run by Barkley. So little plays like that go a long way. Do I think he's going to make this roster? No. Is he going to get a practice squad spot? More than likely. And I think that's the reason why coaching staffs seem to enjoy the presence of David Sills. It's not because he's going to be like Jalen Hyatt burning Sauce Gardner. That's never going to be his game.
No, I actually wouldn't be at all surprised if maybe David Sills got picked up by another team like the Jets. Yeah, the Jets are suddenly very thin at wide receiver with Corey Davis retiring at 28 years old. Yeah, we could potentially see the Jets claim David Sills off of waivers during final cutdowns or after final cutdowns because he did have a pretty good game, except for that one play. And that, like, the Giants have seen him where he looks good and then fades against better players. But again, the Jets, they've got that opening towards the back end of the roster where the Giants might not. Like, the Giants probably don't have a Garrett Wilson on their roster. We hope Jalen Hyatt becomes that kind of player, but that's a lot to put on the rookie right now, to just assume he's going to be not just the best wide receiver in his draft class, but as good as the best wide receiver in the previous draft class. That's a lot. We hope it happens, but we're not going to put that kind of expectation on the kid right now. But
one more thing I want to bring up,
go ahead,
Chris.
Go ahead, man.
Before we get out of here, is the linebacker position. because Micah McFadden didn't play, which is a tip or check in the box, tip of the cap, whatever you want to say there. In the fact that he's going to be starting next to Bobby Okereke. Not surprising. Darian Beavers did play in this game, but Carter Coughlin played, and he made, I think, 2 or 3 impressive tackles. One was a tackle for a loss where he outran the offensive lineman on a zone stretch type of play, stayed square to the line of scrimmage. And one thing about Carter Coughlin, he fell in the draft because he has like 31-inch arms and he was an edge rusher at Minnesota. But his 10-yard split was very quick. It's in like the 90th percentile or more.
Yeah.
And on plays like that, you see it. Now, he's not going to make this roster because of his linebacking skills. What he's going to make this roster for is his special team skills. He had, I think, 9 special teams tackles, led the team last year. But we all know Cam Brown, another linebacker, is also a special teams player. Now, you could say both of them are going to make the roster. It's going to be tight squeeze this year. This team's better than it was last year. And to me, I think Carter Coughlin has proven more as a linebacker, more than, say, Cam Brown. So do you think Carter Coughlin isn't solidified, but what do you believe about the Carter Coughlin, Cam Brown special teams / linebacking argument? Do you think there's a roster spot for both of them? If not, who would you select?
I think if it comes down to one or the other, I would go Carter Coughlin because, well, for the simple fact that Coughlin's been healthy. Cam Brown hasn't been playing. He didn't play this game. I believe he didn't play the first game. So, yeah, it's tough to make the team from the training room. And yeah, Carter Coughlin is out there. He was impressive. He had a few impressive disruptive plays out there on defense. He only played 6 defensive snaps a year ago. And yeah, we can't say that how he played in the 3rd preseason game convinced Wink Martindale to give him some defensive snaps or to make him a cog in this defense. But maybe it made the Giants feel good enough that if, say, something happened with Micah McFadden, or maybe if Haba Baldonado or Sean Bauer aren't quite living up to expectations, then Carter Coughlin does have that edge rusher pedigree. Maybe they could use him as a off-ball linebacker who rushes. He would still be primarily a special teamer, but if they had those snaps open up at some point on the defense, they could feel better about him than Cam Brown, who is also not a bad special teams player, but just hasn't shown it on the field on defense as well.
All right, Chris, anything else before we get out of here?
Nope. I think that about does it. It's about 9:45. We're going to have a busy couple days. So, maybe folks should get some rest.
All righty, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Chris and Nick show here on Big Blue View Radio. Please, if you have not done so already, like and subscribe. This will also be on our podcast at Big Blue View Radio. You can get that wherever you digest podcasts. Also, head on over to bigblueview.com, where we are going to place all of our written content about your beloved New York Football Giants. Thanks, everyone. Take care of each other. Have a lovely day.